And today we are talking about the Welsh king who took the throne in England. Henry VII, head of the Tudors, the patriarch of them. My name is Marae and welcome to Marae's News, an anti-AI generated history channel. I'm a real woman with my own perspectives on history. So let's talk about the biography of Henry VII. Let's talk about his early life to start with. The Tudor family descended from Welsh warriors. Ednifed Feichian, the legendary warrior who served the kingdom of Gwynedd under Llywelyn the Great, and his successor, Dafydd ap Llywelyn. And Ednifed had a very prestigious marriage, and the family secure lots of property across Anglesey. But this status was shattered. Following the overthrow of Richard II, the family's military alliance is changed. The family give the military alliance to Owain Glyndŵr, who, as we know, had quite the revolt. Rhys ap Tudur passes away in 1412 in Chester. He's executed because the family aligned with Owain Glyndŵr. And the family have their ancestral homes confiscated. So the family are on their knees. Owain Tudor, for example, he enters French military service during the 100 Years' War. And believe it or not, the family actually start to become aligned with English royalty. The maternal line actually gains a very contested small lineage to the English throne. Lady Margaret Beaufort, who is Henry Tudor's mother, is born on the 31st of May, 1443. And Margaret is very, very rich because her father committed suicide. She marries Edmund Tudor on the 1st of November, 1455. She's only 12 years old. The War of the Roses really intervenes. Edmund, Henry's father, is captured and he dies of a plague in Carmarthen Castle, leaving his young pregnant widow of a wife really vulnerable. Luckily, Margaret has her brother-in-law Jasper Tudor, who gives her shelter, takes her. Margaret gives birth age 13 to Henry Tudor, and a lot of myths say that this birth occurred in the tower of Henry VII. He was born in the outer Henry VII tower, but actually modern day archaeology disagrees, and there's a modern day Tudor era mansion house at the base of the tower. Wales, when Henry Tudor was born, is a mess. Owain Glyndŵr's rebellion had finalized. It came to a conclusion in 1415, but in 1401 and 1402, the English government had created some what would call discriminatory laws against the people of Wales. Death by penny, the penal laws and statutes were designed to dismantle some of the economic, social and military capabilities of the Welsh people. And some people would argue the Welsh people were second-class citizens in their own country. Some of these laws included Welshmen who were not allowed to own their own land, Welshmen who were not allowed to rule in their own town, so they were not allowed to go into office. Suppression of the bards, you know, a big one for me, suppressing the arts. And Welshmen were not allowed to own castles, fortresses or fortified buildings. Englishmen who were married to Welsh women were not allowed to go into public office. These statutes, not very good for the Welsh people, were they? There was a lot of legislation against us, or my ancestors, and the native achylwyr, or gentry, were not given opportunities. The problem is though, the way these laws were legislated, it was very uneven per region. And this is when we're gonna go back into Henry VII, Henry Tudor. These laws were not very enacted, but they could be weaponized. So civil disputes, Englishman versus a Welshman, Englishman would have higher priority. There's a systematic disadvantage to Welsh litigants. And what's strange as well is that we see a lot of English nobility bypass these laws as well and integrate well with Wales and Welsh customs and Welsh language. That's the Wales that Henry VII grew up in. Right. Jasper Tudor, Henry's uncle, is forced into exile. This is because of the Yorkist triumph in 1461, and young Henry was granted to Sir William Herbert, a powerful Yorkist. Henry is raised in Raglan Castle, and he receives quite a great education, quite classical. He studies English and Latin. The role of the Welsh language, it's a huge debate in Wales whether Henry spoke Welsh. Obviously, this is my belief, Henry would have been around Welsh all the time. He probably had a Welsh wet nurse, You know, he would have understood Welsh, but would he have been able to write it and speak it? That's the really important part. Welsh was the dominant vernacular, and there is no surviving documentation, that he spoke or wrote Welsh. On the balance of probabilities, he probably did at least understand the language. Any development of Welsh linguistic identity was shattered in 1471. The first Lancastrian collapse happened at the Battle of Tewkesbury. Jasper and Henry Tudor were besieged at Pembroke Castle. They are rescued by a band of local rebels, actually, and they go to Tenby and hide in a merchant ship owned by Thomas White, escaping across the English Channel. Henry, for 14 years, goes off to France, actually Brittany to be exact. So from the ages of 14 to 28, this is where Henry spends some of his most formative years. Yes, Henry VII did come from Welsh nobility. Welsh culture was pretty outlawed by that point, and Henry had to go into exile. Henry is immersed in the courts of Duke Francis II of Brittany and King Charles III of France. And Henry is immersed into like French culture. Henry by this point is more comfortable speaking French than English, never mind Welsh. And when Henry returns to Britain as an adult, apparently he had a French accent. Yeah, it created a very pragmatic man. Henry is a very pragmatic ruler by this point. He's got bits of Welsh culture, English culture, and notably French culture. However, what is the culture Henry uses to gain forces and march to war? Celtic culture, Welsh culture. I would say that Henry VII is a modern man. He's European. He comes from a lot of different cultures. Henry used a lot of Welsh mythology to create this image. Henry was very strategic actually, and grew with a lot of advantages because he grew up in courts where he learned about strategy, like, you know, royal strategy, military strategy, right? How to survive. Edward Plantagenet dies in 1483 and his throne is usurped by Richard III, and England's in political instability. Henry Tudor thinks he's the claimant of the Lancastrian faction. He's seeking a unique opportunity. Henry has a few things that other claimants may not. First of all, Henry has French financial support. He gained a network, and he has a small circle of English exiles. Henry sails from Harfleur on the 1st of August 1485. Henry strategically decides to land at Mill Bay, a sheltered cove in the Dale Peninsula, on the mouth of Milford Haven on the 7th of August 1485. And this remote landing site is very familiar. It's very close to his birthplace of Pembroke. How do I do it like that? Pembroke, Wales. And it's away from the the military surveillance of Richard III. So apparently when Henry arrives, he kneels on the sand, made a sign of the cross, and recited Psalm 23. And he believes that this quest is like divinely sanctioned pilgrimage. The turning point in his campaign is when he recruits the Welsh. Sir Rhys ap Thomas is recruited, and he's the most powerful magnate in South Wales. Rhys faces a moral dilemma. He had previously swore solemn oath to Richard III. Oof. And he vowed that Henry Tudor would only land in Wales over his belly, so he'd put his life on the line. And in order to circumvent his conscience, Rhys devised a literal way to do this, a loophole. He lay beneath the Mullock Bridge near Carew Castle. He allowed Henry and his marching army to literally walk over him. So he put his life on the line, but he allowed Henry to walk over him. Rhys then mobilizes his army, his Welsh army, of longbowmen and infantry, and he joins Henry's march. In North Wales, happenings are happening. William ap Gruffydd secures Gwynedd for the Tudor cause, and he mobilizes his regions, takes control of Carnarvon Castle. On the 22nd of August, I think it's 1485, the two armies meet at the Battle of Bosworth field. Richard III has like 12,000 people, apparently. And Henry's army is pretty small, actually. It's like 5,000 to like 8,000. And then crucially, a third army, right? 6,000 men actually watching this under the command of Lord Thomas Stanley and Sir William Stanley. And they're watching the engagement for a distance because they don't want to commit to either side because they don't know who's going to win. Henry has like no military experience, and he gives the tactical command of his vanguard to John de Vere. Correct me in the comments how to pronounce these names. Gives his, by this point then, Richard is really going for Sir William Stanley is like, right, a side has been decided, I'm going to give 3,000 of my troops up. Where Sir William Stanley goes for Henry's side. The Yorkist cavalry charge is overwhelmed, Richard III is killed in action, and Henry Tudor is crowned King of England. 331 years of Plantagenet rule are gone. Bye bye. Here's the thing, Henry VII claim to the English throne is like very, very weak. It's doubtly illegitimate Lancastrian ancestry that Henry was citing. Henry's got to legitimize himself with Celtic culture. So he uses the prophecy of the Mab Darogan. According to this, the son of the prophecy, a messiah-like figure who would liberate the Welsh from the Saxons and the Normans. And whilst bards were meant to be kind of like banned in Wales, during the exile, Jasper and Henry kind of cultivated relationships with bards, encouraging these bards to identify Henry as the messiah-like figure, the person who liberated the Welsh from the Sais, as I like to call them, from the Sais. Snap back to when Henry gets on the shores of Pembrokeshire. These bards were already starting to prophesize and speak about how Henry was like this messiah-like figure who was going to liberate the Welsh. And this meant that thousands of native Welshmen were enlisted in the army. Also, Henry was very into a certain figure that is very famous in Welsh folklore. Idraig Coch, the Welsh dragon. The red dragon in Wales carries massive symbolism for us. It's associated with Merlin and the ancient Britons, and it's linked to Cadwaladr, the 7th century king of Gwynedd, and the High King of the Britons, who the Tudors claim descent from. And Henry aligns kind of this Welshness with like the ancient Brittonic line, like the real Britons, which is kind of true. After Henry's coronation, he really wants to emphasize his legitimacy, so he gets churchmen to do a genealogical search for him. And Henry claims that he's aligned with people like Rodri Mawr and Hywel Dda, and he's even trying to connect himself with people like King Arthur. Henry really needs like a lineage that predates the Normans. Henry even makes sure that his firstborn son, Arthur, is given a name that's associated with Wales. Henry really is trying to unify the English and the Welsh, because the English and the Welsh at the time were very tired of war. Even though Henry VII did use his Welsh ancestry quite a bit, Welsh bards were celebrating while Henry came in, but Henry needed to centralise like the English state. That was his job, stabilisation of England, like not celebrating Welsh culture. Henry rarely set foot in Wales after 1485, apparently, as the story goes. And Henry, whilst he rewards like the Welsh elite who supported him, Sir Rhys ap Thomas is knighted, William ap Gruffydd is appointed Constable of Carmarthen Castle, and Henry surrounds himself with Welsh courtiers. Henry revived and formalised the Council of Wales and the Marches in 1493, because the border, by that point, was like the Wild West. It was full of so many disputes. Welshmen are back allowed to buy land, and a lot of the penal laws are kind of like walked back. You know, the penal laws are 1401 and 1402. Welsh people had to fight for them. You know, Welsh gentry had to pay a lot of money to get these laws walked back. Arthur passes away, and Henry VIII, the second in line to succession, actually gains the succession. Henry VIII acquires the throne in 1509, and he marries Arthur's widow, Catherine of Aragon. We know what kind of marriages Henry VIII ended up having. That guy was... And Henry VIII is not so kind to the Welsh people. Him and his minister, Thomas Cromwell, they begin a massive programme of administrative and legal consolidation. And Henry VIII believes that the separate administration of Wales, the devolution of Wales, what we would call in modern day devolution, because that's what's happening in the country now, but he believes that this kind of devolution is a threat to England. He creates the Laws in Wales Act, and there's a lot to divide because of the Laws in Wales Act. In conclusion, yeah, Henry, I've never covered the Tudors. When I had to learn about them in school, I would just walk out of class, I wouldn't go in. Was Henry VII culturally Celtic? I think so, but Henry VII had a lot of different cultures within him, and he was very European. He was, you know, what do they call it? European, innit? Modern man for that time. Yeah, I do think there's, you know, I had no idea that Henry VII was Welsh, but Welsh people don't claim him. I don't know, what do you think? In the comments, write if you think that Henry VII was culturally Celtic. I know there's like a huge debate here in Wales. It's called, you know, in Wales right now there's a huge debate about who is Welsh and what is being Celtic about? The language was very exclusive back in the day, where now the Welsh government is promoting Cymru pawb, which means Welsh is for everyone, Wales is for everyone, and Welsh is for everyone. And so this idea of Celtic identity in the 2020s has gone, you know, this idea of Celtic identity in 2020 is changing quite a bit. Anyway, I'm really tired. Write what you think about this video in the comments. If I pronounced anything wrong, then put it in the comments.